Thank you very much for joining our last session for the ISO 27001 Foundation Training course. Today we will cover the last component in the ISO 27001, and just I want to refresh your minds. In the first session, we discussed some important basics and concepts related to the ISO 27001 as the difference between policies, standards, procedures. Also, we discussed the definition of the security pillar, which are the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We covered also the ISMS and the definition of ISMS, where this is the systematic approach for managing and protecting the data. When we went through the ISO 27001 and the benefits of the ISO and what are the advantages which you will have it as an organization if you implement the ISO, and what are the values which it will be added to the organization as well. In the second day, we covered the first components of the ISO 27001, where the ISO standard consists of two main components. The clauses and the requirements. Clauses are considered the requirements where you have to implement in your organization, and this it will be audited by an external auditor to ensure that they are implemented in the organization based on the ISO 27001 best practice. And if they are implemented properly, then this means that you will be certified and compliant for the ISO 27001. The second component, which we will cover today, is the the Annex A. And Annex A is the list of the controls, and we mentioned that the ISO 27001 provide a list of recommended controls which are distributed across 14 sections. Across 14 sections of total controls, 114 controls. Today, we will go through these controls. We will have a look on these controls and the relation between these controls and the ISO. As I mentioned before, or I frankly speaking, I cannot remember if I mentioned this or not, but anyway, if you had a copy of the ISO 27001 and you went through it and you find that you cannot understand, or the information is still not clear and you need additional clarification for this information, what you have to do. ISO, we understand that. We know very well that this information, it may not be clear for all the persons. So they developed what we call it the ISO guidelines. ISO guidelines. What are the ISO guidelines? ISO guidelines, these are the some additional document as ISO 27002 and 27003. ISO 27002, it will provide you more details about the Annex A, about the recommended security controls. And the ISO 27003, it will provide you more details and information about the ISO 27001 clauses. And this means that as we will go today through the controls, if you find yourself cannot understand it, or you need additional information, just you can get this document for 27002, and this it will provide you additional information for the security controls. Now I will share my desktop, then we can start the session. And of course, as we mentioned, my friends, please feel free to ask your questions at any time. If you don't understand, stop me, ask your question. This is very important to ensure that you had the information and the training was informative for you. If you are not able to speak, because I know that we are suffering from the internet connections, you can type your question in the chat, and regularly I will have a look on the chat and answer all your questions there. Okay. In module number 5, we will cover the Annex A, and the Annex A, as we mentioned, it covers the controls. We have 114 controls. They are distributed in 14 sections, started from A5 into A18. And as I told you a few minutes ago, that if you need more information about the controls, you can read the document ISO 27002. This is supplementary standard for the ISO 27001, and it will provide you more details about the recommended security controls. The Annex A, as we mentioned, they are, or the Annex A consists of 14 sections, start from A5. We have the information security policy, organization of information security, and of course, my friends, when you will hear the expression organization in the security management, especially in the ISO standards or documents, you have to understand that he wants to tell you about the roles and responsibilities, which can be represented by the RASI, which we explained in the last session. Also, you have the human resources security section, the asset management, the access controls, the cryptography, and environment security, operation security, communication security, system acquisition development, supplier relationship, incident management, business continuity, and the compliance. These are the sections which we will cover today in our session, including the controls and the meaning of these controls. First, Annex, it will be the information security policy. Of course, you can remember when we mentioned that the security policy, this is a very important topic, and this the security policy, it is the responsibility of the top management. We have to develop the security policy because it shows the commitment of the management for protecting the organization assets, when we will be able to achieve the organization's goals and objectives. Also, the security policy, it will state the intent and the requirements of the management for the security in the organization. Usually, the policies, it will have some general or generic requirements. For example, we have to protect our data, we have to protect the data in all status, we have to be compliant with the international regulation, we have to be compliant with the international regulations, we have to protect the customer data and privacy. We have to provide the availability of the data and protect the availability as well, for example, 24/7 by 365, and so on. Then this will be all the information which are required and the security controls which are required. Also, the policy or the security policy must be updated. It must be updated regularly. It must be communicated to the employees and the stakeholders. Even we are internal or external management, we have to explain the importance of the security to the stakeholders and how this it will improve the organization, and it will improve the overall performance and productivity for the whole company. Information security policies, it must be very clear, it must be available for all the users. It can be published over the intranet, or for example have printed copy, but it should be available for all the users when they require. The last thing which I want to say about the security policies here, that in the security policies you can find two types of policy. This one, it will be general security policy. Security policy, and this general security policy, it will cover the required security policy for the organization. And you may also find other related policies for the same organization, which are called specific topic policy. This specific topic, it may be email policy, it may be internet access policy, it may be acceptance usage policy, it may be cryptography policy, it may be remote access policy, it may be compliance policy, whatever. When these, it will give you more details. When in the general security policy, this you will have the main security objectives and requirements, and with specific topic policy, you will have detailed information about specific topics, about a specific topic as email, as cryptography, as compliance, as whatever, and each one of them, it will have its own the requirements which are mandatory to be implemented in the organization. This is related to the information security policy. In Annex number A6, this is the organization of information security. And as I mentioned to you before, my friends, when we are speaking about organization in the security management, especially in ISO, we mean the roles and responsibilities. Of course, when we speak about roles and responsibilities, this we mean for security. It's not for anything else. We have to define the RASI as well. We have to define the RASI, and as we explained with last session, the RASI is all the tasks and what is the role of each person. He may be responsible for implementing this. He may be accountable for it. He may be just a consultant or informative to provide him some information. Then we have to make segregation of duties. You have to divide the important or critical duties or tasks into two different parts. Yeah, for example, let me give you an example. You know that if you have a locker or a safe, and this safe, it has sensitive information or money or whatever, then this means that in some situation you may have two keys, and these two keys we are not present with one person only. Two persons, each one have a separate key, and they have to be in the same place if you want them to open this lock or this safe, for example. When this, which we call it segregation of duties, and of course this, it will be a part of a very important security concepts, my friends, which we call it the conflict of interest, to avoid conflict of interest. For example, developers should not be the people who are responsible for running the applications in the productions. People who are recover the data or restore the data should not be the owner for the backup data backup. These are some examples of the conflict of interest and segregation of duties It is mainly it will resolve all these conflict of interest, and it will increase the level of security as well. Contact with authorities and contact with the special interest groups. This is again important point, because if you are a big organization, for example, if you are a big organization in Saudi Arabia, this means that you have to be in contact with the national cyber security authority in Saudi Arabia. You must have a dedicated contact person from this organization to be in contact with the NCA, to update them with the new requirements, to receive the new standards, to understand their requirements, to raise their compliance reports, and so on. Also, you must have a dedicated contact person for the special interests groups. For example, you may have some special interest groups who are interested in security, or it may be different fields as manufacturing, or maybe financial, or whatever. These are interested groups, maybe over the internet, and we are providing important information regarding some specific topics. For example, you may have special interest groups in security, or maybe manufacturing, or maybe education, whatever the fields which you are interested in. You must have a clear contact person for this situation. For example, if you have an agreement, for example, with a consultant, and this consultant, it will provide you the advices and the auditing for your infrastructure. Again, you have to define a dedicated person who will be responsible for managing the relation between your organization and the interest groups. The other point, the information security in project management. This is a very important issue. Very important that you have the project management to consider the information security project, because as we clarified before, the security, it should not come in the last phase. Security, it should start from the scratch with the projects, with the operations, with the processes, and so on. Then if you have any project for implementing or whatever, anything you require, you have to keep this in your mind. You have to provide the security requirements in the project management. In A6 also, it covers the mobile device policy, or it may be some people, they are called it bring your own device. This it can be if you the organization, it will allow to use mobile devices. These mobile devices, it may be owned by the organization, and it will be distributed to the employees, or the employee, he can bring his own device as mobile or tablet or desktop. Sorry, not desktop, of course, it will be a notebook. And what is the operating systems which it will be allowed, if it's iOS, if it's Windows, it's Android, whatever the type of the operating system, based on the security policy. Finally, we will have the teleworking. Teleworking, this in other words, it is the remote access. It is the remote access. If the organization, it will allow you the remote access or not. This, if the management allow the remote access, then these are the controls which you have to implement it to make sure that the organization and the information are accessed securely, remotely, as well as the application as well. Okay. In A7, this, it will cover the human resources security. And I am quite sure that most of us, when we had a look on the Annex sections, we were very surprised when we heard human resources security. Why human resources security? It's coming for protecting information. But my answer here is very simple, my friends, because human resources and human in general, they are the main assets for our organization. Human are main assets for our organizations, and this is the reason why the human resources is very important. First of all, the human resource department, we have to do a lot of exercises. I am afraid that not all these exercises are done properly in the Middle East. For example, screening. What is the screening? When you apply for a job, then we will do some interviews, we will make some exams till we will accept your competence and skills, and we think that you are the proper person who can be hired in their organization. But before agree about the hiring and sign contract with you, we have to provide or to do some exercise. We have to check your background. We have to ask you about your certificates. We have to check the certificates. We have to call your ex-employer. We have to make sure that you don't have any crime or hacking histories and so on. Then we have to make sure that you are really a good person and you deserve the job in their organization. Also, we have to define what are the terms and conditions of employment. We have to be very clear. We have to provide you a contract. We have to provide you the NDA, which is required for protecting the data. We have to provide you with all the policies to be very clear, because this, it will be very important. Of course, it's nonsense that you will, after signing the contract, you will say, I don't agree about the internal policies, or this is not matching, or it may be violating some international regulations, for example, as GDPR or whatever. When we have to be very clear for the terms and conditions of employment, it has to be written in the contract. We have to provide you a clear list for your income, monthly income and yearly income, and what are the other benefits, and all this information, which I am quite sure that all of you know about. Also, what are the management responsibilities? It's very important when you have employer, that this employer, we have to be satisfied. And of course, we are splitting this exercise into 3 phases. First phase, it will be during the employment, and as we mentioned, we have the screening, we have the contract and all this stuff. Then we have during the working in the organization, we have to provide you the security awareness, we have to provide you training, we have to provide you education, we have to build your career. It is very important to keep the employee satisfied, because if the employee is not satisfied, this means that he can leave the company to other company, or he may move into another organization, and this means that you are losing your skills, you are losing your employee. This, it will affect your operation, it will affect your reputation, it will affect your market share. It will have a really great impact on the operation and the your reputation in the market. These are the reasons why the HR security is considered as one of the important security controls, which are highlighted by the ISO 27001 to protect the organization and help organization to achieve its objectives and goals. Okay, in Annex A8, the asset management. Of course, asset management, this is very important, my friends. And without asset management, we will not be able to have any security controls or to understand any type of security management. Because if I don't have the assets and I can understand my assets very clearly, then how can I protect? How I can protect something which I don't know about? And this it happened. It is happening in the life. For example, when we are going to some companies and we start to do the exercises for the security controls, then after we finish the risk assessment, we are saying the administrator, oh my God, I forgot another server. It is not so important, but it is reside in the one of the branches, and it is important for the branch. We are connecting to some specific application and so on. Although this server, it may not be important for you or for the application, but still it is a part of your network and it can be considered as a risk. If I am a hacker, I will never attack the data center. I will try to attack the branches, because the branches, it will not be protected the same security level as the data center. Then this server which you forgot about it, it can be considered as a risk, which it can be utilized and it can be compromised, and you will find that the hacker, he will have the control over your network, and unfortunately you forgot the server. Then the hacker, he will be able to log in, he can install a TSR, or you can face some APIs, sorry, I mean the APT, the hackers, the advanced persistent threads, and these are the hackers who are reside in your network, just monitoring the traffic until they can find the chance which we can compromise the network. Then you must have the inventory of the asset. It is very important to have inventory of the assets. Please spend as much as time as you can for the inventory of the asset. You have to understand the inventory of the asset. You have to understand the ownership of the asset. Who is the owner of the asset? It is very important from these two bars to get another very valuable information. It is the value of the asset, even if it's not mentioned as a control, but it is very important that you have to define the value of the asset, because the value of the asset, it will define the required controls for these assets. If we have a high priority or high value assets, we have to provide more controls. These controls, it can be in form of encryption, it can be a form of strong authentication. We can add additional controls for confidential data, and for normal data, it can be normal security controls or the baseline security controls. Also, you have to develop the acceptable use policy for assets. And usually this is the policy which is signed by the employees when they are receiving the organization assets. It may be a desktop, it may be a notebook, it may be even the internet access, because by the end of the day, internet access is considered as an asset for the organization. We have to make acceptance usage for all these assets. And of course, after you leave the company or by the end of your contract, you have to return all these assets, and these assets should be returned in a proper shape, and you have to deal with this asset as your personal devices. Classification of information, it is very important. You have to classify the information, because as we mentioned, the classification of information or assets is very important, because this, it will help to define what are the important servers, or what are the important assets or data, which it will help you to achieve your objectives and goals. And based on this classification for the information which is classified as critical, for example, or confidential, you can provide encryption for all type of or all the states of the data, even it's in data in rest or data in transient. For the non-classified data or public data, this means that you don't need to provide any security controls, because I'm not afraid about this data. This data is public and it should be available over the internet for my customers. For example, I have what we can say a brochure for your services or a list of services or whatever. When this, it should be published over the internet. It's not classified. I don't need to provide any security controls. But if the data, for example, it's confidential as a price list or whatever, this is confidential. I have to encrypt the data. Even if I will exchange this price list with my customers or partners, I have to keep this one encrypted and to protect it. And even if I can use strong authentication for FA, this will be better. The other point here, it will be the label of the information. The information or the asset, it should be labeled. The label, this, it will help the organization. Just it will help the organization. It's not something international. This only it will help the organization. For example, you may find some label. It consists of, for example, 6 characters. These 6 characters, it will tell that first character, it will be the country where the asset or the information it's reside. The second, it will be for the city. The third, it will be the location or building. This will be fourth, it will be for owner, for example. Other one, it will be for building, whatever. When these are the information which it will help you to understand where this asset. Because when I tell you I have a notebook, for example, you may have an organization, it has 50,000 employees. Then for this 50,000 employees, they have their own notebooks, and you have one notebook. It will be very difficult to say, this notebook, it resides with the user in second floor, in building number 2, in Washington, for example, in Texas, in America. This, it will be not easy, but how we can handle it, if I can have a code and these 6 characters or whatever number of characters, it will represent the actual location or whatever any other information required. This, it will be great, and it will be very helpful for all the employees and the management and the people who are responsible for the asset management as well. How to handle the asset? Handling the assets, it's very important that you have to provide the assets with proper security controls. You have to provide the protection. You have to provide power or proper power resources, UPS, for example. You have also to keep these assets secure. Don't keep it in an open area. For if you have a notebook, you can use a security chain where you have to lock the notebook into the desk. When there is no one, you will be able to take the notebook or steal the notebook and compromise the data. These are the things which you have to handle the assets. You have to handle the assets to protect the asset and protect the information which it contains. The management of removable media, if you are allowing removable media as USB, as external hard disks, or whatever the type of removable media, then you have to create a policy for the removable media and how it can be exchanged, what is the data which you can copy it on this removable media. For example, if you have confidential data, then we are not allowed to be copied into removable media. Removable media, for example, can take non-confidential data or non-sensitive data and the public data. You have also to define how this data it will be transferred between or this removable media it will be transferred outside the organization. In some situation, you may want to take some data outside. Is it possible or not? And if it's possible, what are the steps which you have to do it to make sure that this data it will not be compromised or it will be have unauthorized access by anyone. Also, how you will disposal of the media disposal. You remember when we explained the methods of disposing the media, we mentioned that to dispose the media, you have multiple ways. Number one, you can destroy the hard disk. You can crash the hard disk. If you will crash the hard disk, this means that you will not be able to retrieve any data out of it. Or you can degaussing. Degauss the hard disk means that you have to expose the hard disk into a strong magnetic field. And of course, because the data is stored in the form of 0 1s on the magnetic media of the hard disk, when it is exposed to the magnetic field, this means that it will not, the data, it will be destroyed and you will not be able to retrieve it again. Another method for the overguiding. Please don't delete just the data, because deleting the data, it will not be enough to delete the data, because when you are deleting a data, what you are doing, that you are deleting the pointer to the data. You are deleting the pointer which is exists in the FAT allocation, the file allocation table, and this it will be only deleted. But actually, the data is still on the hard disk, and this is the reason why if you faced a problem, hard disk crash, you can take this hard disk and going to some computer shops and ask him to retrieve your data. They can do the exercise, or at least they can retrieve a part of this information. Finally, how you will be able to physical media transfer. For example, if you have some items you want to move it outside the your premises, outside the organization, you have to take security permission. You have to inform the owner. You have to keep a record for all the medias which are exchanged outside the organization, and so on. This is the section for the A8, which covers asset management. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. The other control, it is the access controls. And access controls, my friends, this which we covered before, it speaks about the IEEE. And of course, whatever any control which you can see it here, it will move around these 4 definitions. You have to redefine the identification of the users, authentication of the users, authorization of the users, and users accounting. As you can see, access control policy, you have to define what is the access control policy. For example, if you have confidential data, you would say that I will use a strong authentication by using 2FA. I must have additional logging for the information for accessing these confidential data. If the users have privileged accounts, then we have to use 2FA as well. We have to provide additional logging. The data, this logging, it should be exported from the devices and kept as a separate entity. Then no one he will be able to delete it, and so on. Then you have to define an access control policy related to authentication, authorization, accounting, how the user he will be authenticated, what are the type of the data which requires strong authentication, the authorization, what are the type of the how the authorization or the user permissions it will be assigned. Is it based on a specific rule or a group or some other attributes for the users, and so on. Again, the authorization for access to network and network devices, this is related to authorization. This is related to the authorization to be authorized to access the network. User registration and deregistration, this which we call it, my friends, provisioning. Which we call it provisioning. You will find this expression too much provisioning or deprovisioning. Provisioning or deprovisioning. Provisioning, this means that user registration, that you are a new employee, we want to create an account for you, then how this account it will be created. basically user registration or user provisioning. Deregistration, that you are terminated or you left the company and we have to remove your account from the access controls or the deprovision. And of course, I think this is clear in user provision. Management of privileged access rights. This is very important. Privileged access rights is very important because this it will provide critical functions for the users, and we have to provide you have to provide the strong authentication. You have to provide encryption for all their traffic. You have to provide logging for their activities and so on. Management of secret authentication information of users. This, what we can say, the privacy of the users. You have to provide the privacy of the users and the secret authentication. Secret authentication, you know, in some situation, you may need to be authenticated when the operating system, it will send you a token for authentication. Some situation, this token, or it may be cookies, it can be installed on the, or it can be written on the hard disk, and if the operating system does not delete this cookie after you logged out, then this means that this cookie, it can be utilized later by a hacker or unauthorized user to access your data. Review user access rights. This is very important. This is very important. We are afraid of the rights accumulative. Today, you are working in IT field, you have a permission for application 1 and application 2, then you are promoted to work in the security department, you are allowed access for application 3 and 4, but if the security administrator, he did not do the exercise properly, and he did not remove you from the group of the IT department and remove your permission for application 1 and application 2, then by the end of the day, that you will be able to access application 1, 2, 3, 4, and this it can be accumulative when you are moved from one position to another or from one department to another. You will find that the permissions are accumulated, and you may be able to access all the applications because these permissions are not blocked for you when you are leaving these companies. Removal or adjustment of access rights, use of secret authentication information, as we mentioned, for the cookies and the tokens which are used for the authentication. Information access restrictions, this is, depends upon the permission, which, as we mentioned, the authorization. Secure login procedure, we have the operating system provide a secure login procedure. For example, the Windows, it is provide the Kerberos. If you want to have more information about Kerberos and how it's working, and what about the single sign-on and the Summit protocol and all this information, you can access our free video training course on the IT certificates YouTube channel. We have a training course called IDM, or Information Access Management. We are covering all these concepts in details and how the Kerberos operating system is. Finally, you will have the password management system. It is very important to allow your user to change their passwords. It can be done as, for example, Windows. We can change the password by their own, or we can do it through a service desk. The service desk, it will ask them about some information as happening in the banks to make sure that we are really the users who are claimed to be. And if we answer the question, then we will be allowed access, or we can do it automatically by asking them during the provisioning of the user about some questions and the answers. And when the user, he forget the password and he asks to change it, then he will promote him with these questions. And if he answered the question correctly as he defined the answer before during the provision, then the system, it will allow him to change the password and give him the permission to change his password. Use of privileged utility programs. These are the some programs which it can be used for access control and the access control for program source code. This again important point. If you are a developer, if you have source code, you have to provide access control for source code. This is very important. If there is any hacker who was able to access the source code, he can add some malicious comments or additions in the code, and it can, for example, collect data, send the data to black hole, and so on. And this can be compromising for the application and the data as well. Okay, cryptography. Cryptography, it is very important. As I told you before, cryptography, my friends, considered as the backbone of security, because usually we are using the encryption to protect our data, to protect confidentiality, protect integrity, non-repudiation. Then the cryptography is very important, and you have to understand this service very clear. You have to define what are the types of the data which it will be encrypted, what are the data classification which it will be encrypted, if it's the confidential data, or you will generally encrypt all the data if the data is stored on the storage or in the servers or the desktops or exchanged between different hosts. Another important point, which is the most important factor in the cryptography process, it is the key management. Because, of course, the cryptography, it consists of a hashing function, and this hash function, you will have here the text, the normal text, and based on the hashing function, you will have the cipher, which is the encrypted information. But this is not the whole story. Here you will have something called the key. This is the key. It will create the uniqueness of the encryption. No one he will be able to decrypt the data if he does not have the key. When the key, it will be very important. You have to develop a process for generating the key, back up the key, recover the key, share the key, protect the key, key disposal, and all this information. And key screw, if you lost the key, how you can recover it. This is very important, and of course, the time, it will not be enough today to cover all important information about cryptography. But as I mentioned, that we will have a cryptography course. It will be arranged. I'm not sure if it will be next week or week after. This will be again 3 days, 9 hours, and this will be informative course to give you more details about the hashes, I mean the algorithms and the key management as well. Okay. For the A11, physical and environment security. Of course, when we are saying physical and environment security, we mean the data center and the building environment security. As for the building, for example, we may need fences, we may need lights, we may need access controls, security guards, CCTV, motion detection, and so on. These are the things related to the physical security, plus the cabling security as well. Because all the cables used for in IT, except of course the fiber cables, they are depend upon the electric signals, and these cables, we create electromagnetic field around them. Then by using special tools, we can hackers can capture this electromagnetic field, and we can compromise the data. You can find here in the physical and the environment security, we have a lot of controls. Physical security perimeter, as we mentioned, that we have to use fences, you have to use lights, you have to use dogs if possible, you have to use security guards. Physical entry controls, you have to use the access controls where people will not be allowed to enter the locations without their badges. And these badges, it should be read by some access control sensors. Securing offices, rooms, and facilities. It's very important to provide security for the offices. One of the basic concepts of securing offices is that visitors are not allowed to be available in the offices or the room locations. If you have any visitor, then this visitor will have to be in the reception, and there should be a sponsor who will come and meet them in the reception only. We are not allowed to go inside the location. Also, the concept of clean desk, where you should not keep any information on the desk. You should not give any blueprint or documents containing any data on the desk. Then this information can be exposed to unauthorized users. Also, the desktop and the notebook, they should be have the lock screen or screensaver. Then if you left your machine unattended, then automatically it will be moved into the screensaver phase, and it will hide all the information running on the machine itself. We have to protect against the external and environmental threats, for example, floods, high temperature, maybe earthquakes, volcanoes, whatever. These are the environment threats. Working in secure area, as we mentioned, in the securing the rooms, delivery and loading areas. If your organization required to receive items and goods from partners, you have to provide a separated area where this area, it will be used for offloading the goods from the cars. And this area should be separated totally from the offices and the locations where it consists of the data, to make sure that these areas are secure. Equipment setting and the protection, you have to provide secure location for the equipment. You have to provide UPS for power or UPS power for devices to protect the assets against any power surges. You have to protect the machines to protect the data as well. Supporting utilities, cabling security, which we spoke about it, equipment maintenance. This is very important, my friends. I'm quite sure you know about it, because without maintenance, the devices, it will start to lose its performance. It will start to have a degradation in performance and functionality. Then continuous maintenance and support, this it will be very important that the devices and the assets will provide the required performance and required features, so organization can achieve their objectives and goals as it was planned. Removal of assets, this again important concept to remove the assets. First of all, you have to define what are the important assets. You have to define how you can keep the assets secure, and also how the assets will be removed if they are expired. And for example, you know that there are some companies, they are saying that the notebooks, it should be sold after 3 years. Then this is one of the methods of removing the assets. Security of equipment and assets of premises. This is again important issue. If you have to move some assets out of your premises. It may be to other partner, to customer, to other office, to other location, whatever. Then how you will keep these assets secure. Secure disposal and reuse of equipment. It's very important. Reuse of equipment is very important because reuse of equipment, if these equipments are not maintained properly, this means that it can be a risk because this will provide access for some of the data for unauthorized users. Unattended user equipment, as the example which we mentioned before for the notebook, when the notebook is unattended, then it could go through after no action on the PC, then it should go to the screensaver. This, it will hide the information and protect the information. Okay, thank you for your patience. The A12, the section A12 for the operational security. Operational security, as we mentioned before, the operations, it's very important. Why? Because as I clarified to you before, if you have any network or security solution, and this security solution, it is the outstanding security solution, and it has all the mandatory and necessary equipment to protect your data and assets. And if you don't have the right operations team and the talents and the skills which we are able to understand and analyze the logs, to know what are the attacks, what is the right action should be taken to protect the assets and to respond for any incident and so on, then all what you spend is for nothing. Because the security, it's not one-time task. Security, it is a continuous job. You have to implement, you have to design, you have to implement, you have to review, you have to update. Or as we mentioned before in the BDCA, you have to plan, do, check, and act. In the operational security, of course, it's very important the operating procedure, documented operating procedure. This is very important. This is one of the main important tasks for the operation team. They have to properly document all the processes and operations, procedures, because this, it will be used forever. Now, if I have a team and we are having the good experience, we are doing the jobs properly, when today, tomorrow we will be promoted to a different job or a different department, then we will have a new team. With a new team, we are not familiar with the environment, we don't know what should we do. This means that we will start from scratch to do everything from scratch. This, it's nonsense, because we have to build on the last phase of the other teams, and this, it will be documentation. It will help them very much to understand the current situation and how this situation, it can help them to, or I mean the documentation, it will help them to understand the existing environment and process. The change management. Change management, it is one of the processes, important processes actually, where it will protect the integrity of the assets and the information. Because using the change management, this, it will allow authorized changes only. Then if you have a change, you have to fill a form for request for a change. Then you have to propose this change to the CAB, which is the Change Advisory Board. We have to study it, and we make the mandatory and necessary changes or actions. And after we make that, ensure that everything, it will be running fine, then they have to schedule the change, implement it, monitor it, and make sure that the change is able to achieve its objective. Another point, it is the capacity management, where the capacity management, it will help to make sure that the resources are enough for the future and current requirements. Just imagine if you are a developer and you ask the data center team, please, I need 5 servers because we are developing new applications and I want a load balancer to load the traffic between all these servers, and we will tell you, oh, we are really sorry, we don't have this information, you have to make a request and we will escalate it into the purchasing department. Then this means that it will take at least 3 to 4 months you will get these servers. And of course, this is not professional because the team, we must have some equipment on hand for urgent cases, and this, it can be included in the capacity management. Also, for separation of development, testing, and operation environment, it is very important to have these 3 environments, or at least 2 of them. The best practice to have the development, testing, and operation. The operation, this is the operation team, the production environment. Testing, if you want to test anything. Development, if you are develop some applications or services or software or whatever, and you can use it. In some situation, in small organizations, we may not need the development. Testing and operational or production, it's very important. Just imagine if you have a new patch, you want to upload it. Usually you will find the security administrator when their network or servers are exposed, and you will ask them why you did not update the operating system fixes. We are telling, I was really scared to touch the server. This is production, and if I update the patch, I don't know what will happen. This can affect the server and the operation, and I will be in trouble. But if he has the testing environment, he can do it in the test environment, even if the server is hang, I don't care. I can contact the vendor, ask him about this solution. He provide me the best practice, the procedure for upgrading, and when I make sure that everything is fine and I can do this exercise properly in the production, I can do it. Then it's highly recommended to have these environments, or at least testing and operational environments. Controls against malware, information backup. Of course, I will not speak about these things because I'm quite sure that all of you are familiar with this. Protection of log information. It is very important, the log information, to protect it, because as you know that the hacker, when he will compromise the server, after he will finish all the steps or the procedures for compromise the server, he will search for the log file to delete the logs which were created based on his activities. He does not want the security administrator to know that the server is compromised. He wants to keep it secret. Then if he was able to access the log, this means that he will be able to delete the information which improve his activities, and the administrator, he will be blind and will not be, that the server, it's already compromised. It's not only the server compromised, but it may be the whole network, and the whole network will collect data and send it to him. In some situation, it will be better to have files, and it will be migrated into a different server or different storage, which is far away from the server itself, and this it will be utilized for as a backup, for archive, for SIM solutions, and this it will be very helpful and secure in this concept. Also, for the same, it will be applied for administrator and operator logs, because here it is not only the user logs, it will be only administrator and operators. But whatever any changes the administrator or operator, they will do it on the machines or the servers or the services. It should be developed, created in the logs. And again, we should not have any authorization on these logs to get protected. Clock synchronization, you have to synchronize the clock between all the devices. Usually clock synchronization, it is very important in 2 cases. At least these are the cases which I can remember right now. Number 1, if you are using digital certificates, if you are using digital certificates. Number two, for the logs. For the logs, it's very important because now the logs, if you try to make correlation between different machines or appliances and collecting the logs from different appliances, then this means that we want to make sure that the time for all these machines is synchronized. Installation of software operational system, this should be done by qualified persons based on the best practices and recommendation of the manufacturer. Management of technical vulnerabilities, we mentioned that vulnerability management is very important. You must keep a vulnerability management system to search for any vulnerabilities and update it. Restriction on software installation. Some situation you may find that the users are not able to install any software on their machines, except if it's whitelisted. These are some software. It will be installed on the desktops of the users, and it will not allow the users to make any installation of any software except if it's allowed. And this, it will be used to protect against any TSR, terminate and steal resident application, which is installed by the hacker. If a hacker, he was able to compromise a machine and he is trying to run any malware or application or whatever, then if you have a restriction on the software installation on the machine, this means that you will not be able to install this and your machine, it will be secure. Finally, the audit controls. Of course, the auditing, it will be very important because the audit, it will help you too much to discover all the non-conformities as we described and explained yesterday in the audit controls. A13, it is the communication security. Communication security. Communication security, it will cover the network controls. Network controls, it can be VLANs, it can be zones, firewalls, which manage the traffic between multiple zones. It can be encryption to encrypt the traffic over the network. Also the security of network services. The secure network services, I think we covered this before when we mentioned we have some services as, for example, DNS, as DHCP. These are the services which it will help the network operations, but we are unfortunately having some problems. It can be, these problems can be utilized by hackers and it can compromise the data, but you have to protect these services when the network, it will be stable. Segregation of networks, this which we do it through the VLANs. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your servers in one VLAN. Make multiple VLANs. Each VLAN, it may be for department, maybe for division, for floor, whatever. Also, you must have a VLAN for the servers, and you can have another VLAN for restricted servers. Each VLAN can represent a security zone where the firewall, it can control the traffic between these VLANs and security control, security zones. Information transfer policy and procedure, you have to define very clearly what are the information which can be transferred outside your premises. For example, confidential data should not be transferred. You can use the DLP solution for discovering any confidential data when it is leaving the network, to protect it and prevent the data to be compromised or be leaked outside the company. Agreements on information transfer. If you want to make a transfer or business needs to make the transfer of information between your organization and a customer, or organization and vendors or partners, then you can have agreements. You have to make NDA agreement with the other entity to make sure that your data, it will be protected and it will have the proper security controls on the other side to protect the information. Electronic messaging, this it can be in form of email, it can form of chatting, it can be form of IM, instant messaging. It depends. You have to provide the message, the way where you can exchange the messages with your team, with your partners and the vendors, customers. Of course, you have to provide the proper security controls. It can be encrypted to make sure that these information are properly protect the assets. Confidentiality or non-disclosure agreement, NDA, it is very important. You have to keep it in your mind because it will protect your data, even with partners or vendors or maybe employees as internal employees as well. In A14, we have the system acquisition, development, and maintenance. This is a very important topic because it will provide you with all the requirements if you want to buy a new system or to develop a system and maintain the system. You have to define the security requirements and analysis and specification. It's very important, my friends, when you have a new system, don't depend upon the security controls which are provided by the manufacturer or the partner. You have to sit with your team and try to brainstorming what are the required security controls which we require in a firewall, for example. You would say, okay, we need the next generation firewall. It should support IPsec. It should be aware about MACsec. It should have malware software license. It must have network IPS. It should be management. It should easy for GUI. But you have to define what are the security requirements which you require. And when you will get the application or the appliance, you have to compare these points and the security controls which you define, requirements which you define it with the security requirements or specs which are provided by the vendor. Securing application services, you have to secure application services, and I think this is a very important issue. Protecting application services transactions. Of course, if you want to protect it, you can use encryption. Encryption, it will encrypt all the transactions and no one will be able to read it, even if you was able to capture it. Secure development policy. If you are developing some applications inside your network, then you have to provide a policy for secure applications. Don't use any old expired programming language. Don't use any libraries from the internet without analyze it and review its code. Don't use any procedure without understanding and analyze it as well, and so on. System change control procedure. This we discussed in the change management. Technical review of applications after operating platform changes. Of course, this is very important. After you will have any operating system or operating platform, any changes, you have to review the application if it's running properly or not. If there is any changes in the operating environment, you have to make sure that the applications are run securely. And these changes in the operating platform does not affect the applications and its features and mainly the security. Restrictions on change to software packages. Again, it's covered in the change management. Secure system engineering principles. You must have some principles which it will be considered as a Bible for the users. Or the developer. For example, don't use expired programming language. You have to protect data, you have to use encryption, you have to use logging. These are the main principles which it should be in your mind and their mind when we are developing any new application or acquire a new system. Secure development environment. I think we covered this in the previous slide. Outsources development. If you don't have the enough resources for developing or create your own applications, then you can outsource these services from the market and we can help you in develop these applications. It is very important to security testing. It is very important for the security testing for the applications before put this application in the operations. This is very important. Otherwise, you may face a problem because there may be a bug and you will not be able to discover it if you did not test the security characteristics of these applications. System acceptance test, you have to accept the test of the systems with all the requirements and make sure that all the security controls are implemented and so on. Then finally, protection of test data. If you have a test data, you have to protect it because in some situation, this test data, it may have confidential data because by the end of the day, this test data, it will be extracted from the production environment. Then if you have any test data consists of confidential data or sensitive data or privacy data and so on, then you have to provide the same security controls for this data. Although it is installed in a testing environment, but I don't care about the environment, I care about the classification of the data. If the data consists of confidential data, even if it's used in the testing environment, it should be provided with the proper security controls to protect the data. Any questions, my friends? Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In A15, it is the supplier relationship. And supplier relationship, it is very important for the availability. Usually people are saying, what is the relation of supplier relationship with the data, ISMS, Information Security Management? This, my friends, it's called the supply chain. You know, this is a new concept. Not new concept, it's known since a long time, but it started to appear on the top again, supply chain. But you are providing a service, and this service, it is not based only on you. You have a part of it, you have another vendor provide you with some software, another vendor support you with hardware, another vendor support you with raw material, another vendor provide you with so and that. Then by the end of the day, it's a chain, supply chain. When this supply chain, if there is any link which is missed in between, then this means that all your services, it will be affected, and this it will affect one of the important security concept, which we call it the availability. That your data, it will not be available, or your service, it will not be available because the supplier was not able to provide the for example, the raw materials, or maybe the desktop or a software or whatever. You must here to develop and create security policy requirements for the suppliers. You have to split the suppliers into different categories based on the communication and the requirements from each one of them. You may have some security controls or some suppliers which we have to provide you some data, and we need to exchange data with you. Some of these suppliers require confidential data, some others require normal data. Then you have to define what are the security policy and security controls required for each one of them. You have to make an agreement with each suppliers. You have to define the type of the data. You have to define what are the security controls required in the suppliers network to protect your data, because even if you are able to protect your data in your premises, but this data, it will be reside in the suppliers network, and you have to make sure that this data, it will be protected and it will not be leaked by any way. You have to monitor the supplier services. You have to make sure that we will be able to protect your data. We are able to provide you the services as required. You have to create a communication channel between you and the suppliers. You have to define the data. You have to define, when we discussed the communication plan in the closet, this is very important because suppliers, we are a part of the stakeholders, which should be included in the communication plan as well. You have to manage the changes to supplier services, whatever any changes for the services which the supplier are provided you, it should be highlighted and should be studied if it will affect your service or not. You have to keep an eye and work very close with your suppliers to make sure that you are able to provide the service on time. We have also in A16 the information security incident management. Incident management, this is very important. We are a team who are responsible for respond for any incident or any case against the security or any event which it affects the security, confidentiality, integrity, or availability. You have to define a clear responsibilities and rules, how we this team it will respond for the case, what we have to do, what is the way of reporting of the information, what are the actions which we have to take it if there is any case, to whom the information it should be escalated, how the information it will be escalated to the management, and also we have to work very close with the users when we can retrieve the service, or at least to get the service up and running by using any standby solution or redundancy solution or whatever, until the problem management team we will be able to create root cause analysis and understand the case. We have to develop the required policies and procedures to respond to this incident and to prevent this incident from happening again, because it's not enough that you will discover the incident. It will be great to discover the incident, to respond to the incident, recover the service, understand the root cause analysis, and update the documentation. Then this incident, it will not happen once more. In A17 for the business continuity management, this again an important topics, and as you can see when we are speaking about the controls, every one of them I am saying it's an important topic, because actually ISO 27001 controls, we are concentrating on the most important topics. As you can see, your business continuity, you have to plan the security continuity, how the services it will be continuity. This it will help for security availability. You have to implement the security continuity, because this security continuity, it can be in the form of redundancy, it can form of active standby, it can form of disaster recovery side, it can be in form of different sites or data backup and restore. There are a lot of implementation of security continuity, and it depends upon the security policy. Also, you have to review and evaluate the information security continuity. You have to make sure that the continued solution is able to achieve its objective and it's running fine. There are some tests for the service, and you have to check if the production device is down, the other it will take over or not. And yes, it will be done through the testing phases. Availability of information processing facilities. This by replication the data, you can replicate the data into a different site, or you can make a backup. And when the server, for example, it will be down, or storage, then you can get a new server, then recover the data after that, and you will be able to fill over to recover the service, and everything it can run again. In the last control, this for the compliance, of course, it includes not the compliance only for the laws and regulation, but this it will cover compliance with everything, even if it's internal or external. In other words, I can divide it into three phases. To be compliant with the internal policies and procedures. This is very important, because for example, if you have a policy or a standard, it mentioned that the user they should receive a notebook with 4 GB RAM and 1 tera hard disk drive, and the manager should receive a notebook 16 GB RAM and SSD drive. Then if I find any non-conformities or deviations from this standard, I have to check why these policy standards are not applied. Also, you have internally to keep a log for all the contractual agreements and requirements. It can be with your customers, it can be with vendors and partners. You have to make sure that you are able to fulfill these contractual requirements. The second phase, it will be protecting or compliance with the international laws. For example, if you have some application contains personal information for European citizens, then you have to be compatible with the GDPR. If you have some information for American citizens and this information related to health data, then you have to be compatible with the HIPAA, HIPAA, or PCI DSS, or SOX, and so on. Also, the third phase to be compatible with the local local regulation and laws. As in Saudi Arabia, for example, we have the NCA requirement. Then this means that you have to protect all these or to be compliant with all these laws and regulations. If you have any intellectual property and you have to protect it, you have to keep an eye on it, you have to provide the mandatory security controls, you have to make sure that this intellectual property it's not stolen or compromised by anyone. You have to protect the records. You remember when we defined that the ISO defined the record that it is a proof of something happened or a proof of some activities. As we mentioned, that it can be a database record, it can be an email, or even it can be a piece of paper where you make a request that you want to access some specific service. You have to protect these records because this will be considered as the important request for you in the future to understand the activities on the data and system. Privacy and protection of personal data. Of course, you are familiar now with GDPR, where it's required to protect the information for European citizens, privacy information for European citizens, and other rules in America. And even you have personal PII protection in local in some other countries. Regulation of cryptographic controls, we discussed this before, independent review of information security, compliance with security policies and standards. This, as we mentioned, the internal inside the organization, technical compliance review for, again, internal network or internal organization. Now we finished the first the module for the Annex A, and we will start a new chapter.